So all of our real-time capabilities for our entries are now set up. Whenever our entries data is added, updated, or deleted elsewhere on a different device or browser, we're now handling all of those changes and updating our entries ref in real time and updating the page in real time. However, it doesn't look too great currently when we first load the entries. If I reload the page, we can briefly see the No Entries Yet widget appear before we see our entries. And just so that we can see this a bit more clearly, and so we can see how this might look with a slower internet connection, let's add a little delay when we first load our entries and add them to the entries array ref. So let's jump back to store entries and we'll jump to load entries. And after we've got the data from our initial query, which is grabbing all of the entries rows, before we assign those entries to our entries ref here, let's add a little delay. So I'm going to add a set timeout, set the delay to 1000 milliseconds, 1 second. Let's move this line into this set timeout and save that, reload. So you can see this doesn't look great. We don't want to be seeing this No Entries Yet widget as the entries are loading. It would be better to see a loading spinner or something like that. Help me out with a quick like, comment, share, or subscribe. So first of all, let's not display the list of entries or the No Entries Yet widget until the entries are actually loaded from Supabase. So what we could do is add a new ref to our state, and we'll place this underneath our entries array. We could create a constant called entries loaded, set this equal to a ref with an initial value of false. And then once the entries are loaded from Supabase, we'll set this to true. And as long as this is set to false, we're not going to display the entries or the No Entries Yet widget at all. To make those hide, then we're going to need to make this constant available in our components. So let's add this entries loaded ref to our return statement. So I'm going to jump down to the bottom, and in this state section here, I'll just paste in entries loaded and save that. Let's just make sure we're currently importing the ref module from Vue. We are. So let's find where the entries are displayed and this No Entries Yet widget. So if we jump to our Explorer and go to Source, Pages, and Page Entries, this is the page for our entries. We can see the Nothing Here widget here, and we can see this queue list here, which is displaying all of our entries. So what we could do is wrap both of these inside a template tag. Then we could keep that template hidden until this entries loaded ref is set to true. So let's jump back to page entries.vue, and above this transition here, I'm going to add a template tag, and I'm going to collapse this transition tag and this queue list and move them into this template tag. So we can just do if store entries dot entries loaded. So if this entries loaded ref is true, then we're going to display display the No Entries Yet widget and the list of entries. Otherwise, we're not going to show these. And because we currently have entries loaded set to false, when I save this, we should see these disappear. And yeah, we currently see those disappear. So now when our entries are actually loaded from Supabase, we want to set this entries loaded ref to true. So let's jump down to the load entries action. And after we've received the initial data from Supabase and assign these entries to our entries array, we want to set this entries loaded ref to true. So we can just do entries loaded.value equals true. Let's also make sure this ref is set to false at the start of this action in case we need to fire this again later in the app's lifecycle. So let's just do entries loaded.value equals false. So let's save that. We should see our entries reappear again after they're loaded from Supabase. So let's reload the page. And yeah, we now see the entries appear once they've been loaded from Supabase. So now let's show something else while we wait for these entries to load from Supabase. So let's jump back to page entries.vue. So if store entries.entries loaded is true, we're going to show all this stuff. Otherwise, let's show something else. So after this template, let's add a div. We can just add a v else directive to this. For now, let's just display the text loading ... and save that, reload. And we see the text loading, and then we see our entries. Well, this loading text is a bit boring, so let's display one of Quasar's spinner components. So I'm going to jump to the Quasar site. On the left, I'm going to jump to Vue components and spinners. Let's scroll down to the examples. And I'm going to use this chunky one here, this third one in this example. So let's click on View Source, grab this third Q spinner component, and jump back to this div with the v else directive and paste this over this loading text, fix the indentation and save that, reload the page, and we can see that spinner appear. However, this would look a lot better if this was in the middle. So I'm going to jump back to this div here, split the attributes with the split HTML attributes extension. Let's add a class of text-center to place this spinner in the center. Let's also add some padding to this div to push the spinner down a little bit. And we can use Quasar's padding classes for this. And you can find more about these classes on the Quasar site in the style and identity section. Well, let's add Q-PA for padding in all directions, -XL for extra large, save that, reload. And this is now a much better loading experience. Before we move on, let's just remove this delay that we added. So in store entries.js and the load entries action, let's remove this set timeout. Nudge those back. Let's also remove this console log from our entry subscription hook and save that. Get the full course, including authentication, row-level security and policies, database functions and triggers, storage, edge functions, and running Supabase locally from makeappsacademy.com, or click the link in the description.